Last thing I want to talk about today, the virus spending and shutting down protests. I got to tell you, it's the most interesting time to live in America. Before I get into the details of this, it's just the most interesting issue to deal with, this coronavirus and how we handle it. I'll start with just the idea of the spending that we are engaging in. We've talked in recent shows, we talked about the $2.2 trillion bill that the Congress passed, the House, Senate passed, President Trump signed to help rescue people from the damage imposed on the economy, not by an external enemy, the damage imposed on the American economy by the government shutting down the economy. So the government shuts down the economy, and then they put out a spending bill, which all the government ever has to spend is your money, is taxpayers' money. So they shut down the taxpayers' economy. Then they passed a bill. So there's no one has income, no one's working, no one can go to their work except essential, which is a questionable thing by itself. And then they pass these bills to spend your money, to give you back your own money, and then in massive debt that adding to our massive debt. We don't have the money that they're spending. It's funny money anyway. But there's another bill that came out just yesterday, I think. The Senate passed a bill, 484 billion, B as in boy, $billion, 3.5 coronavirus stimulus package by voice vote. They don't normally pass bills of this size and significance by voice vote in the Senate, but there's so much tension in Washington, so much unhappiness, so much, and they could not have the normal, everyone come in, we're going to sit down and have a Senate hearing like we do about these kinds of issues normally. Couldn't even do that. So they passed this massive, nearly 500 billion coronavirus bill. And I would, on the subject of all the rescue bills, I do think we have to be trying to help individuals bridge over this period, especially small business owners, especially individuals who literally depend on their weekly paycheck to live, that they don't actually have savings enough to stay home for 3 months. They don't have savings enough to continue to pay their mortgage or their rent or their food bill or all the other bills they have. They don't have that kind of money saved. These are the working Americans, the good, solid working Americans, not upper class rich people. But we have already, as we talked about, padded these spending bills out of Washington, padded them with all sorts of spending not really needed, spending that is just increasing our debt into astronomical terms that we can't even relate to it. We can't understand what these numbers are. People don't even know what those numbers mean. But there's now an idea of having a $2,000 monthly stimulus check sent out to everybody. And so everybody would get a $2,000 monthly stimulus check. And that's another proposal being discussed to help us get through this crisis. People, the government needs to feel pressure from the people to say, instead of spending more money, open up our economy. And because the reason this money is needed is because the economy is shut down by the government's choice, by the choice of policies that the government put in place. And you can do this. You can both get America back to work and protect the vulnerable people. You can do both. This has to be the message from the voters to their legislators, to their members of Congress and the Senate, and their local legislators and their governors and their county commissioners' courts and their county government and their city government and their mayors. We Americans can be trusted to do both. We can get this country back to work, and we can protect people who are either ill or vulnerable. We can do both. Because part of what happens, I'm going to tell you just a little tease of the story about what all the shutdown spending is doing, not just to the economy and all the businesses that are belly up, bankrupt, going out of business, not just to the individuals who are now receiving unemployment because they don't have a job to go to, but it's already starting to do damage to the American psyche, to the mindset that is basically the idea we're rooted as a people in the idea of self-reliance and work and making our own way. In the state of Kentucky, in eastern Kentucky, there is a couple who decided last year sometime that they were going to open a coffee shop. They described the reason they opened the coffee shop, not just because it was a business idea, but that they wanted to offer their friends, their community in Eastern Kentucky that didn't have a coffee shop in this community, wanted to offer a place for people to come in and get, as they said, good coffee. This is not a name brand. This is not a big national brand. This is a coffee shop, one-off little shop, Eastern Kentucky, good coffee, access to the internet, had Wi-Fi, and a place to sit and talk and connect and help build community. Very sweet sounding couple describing what they really wanted to do was give their neighbors and friends a place to come and be part of a feeling like a growing of community. So they just got it going. Coronavirus came along. They tried to stay open for a while with washing hands and all that. Then they went to the to-go, let's go ahead and just have things to go. You can't go in, but you can pick up coffee. And they even talked about they had nurses and doctors working in facilities where they're dealing with coronavirus patients. Nurses and doctors coming in was a place for them to come in, to get to talk to each other, to pick up a carton of coffee for everybody. That's what this kind of place was. They finally were forced to close because they didn't have any business and they couldn't afford. But what really was the killer, and what I want to point to as a practical example of what I'm talking about in terms of the coronavirus hurting our economy, the owner of the coffee shop said she had individual employees. When she first opened this place, by the way, there were so few businesses like this. She had 1,000 applications for just a few people, just a few openings of people to come and work in this coffee shop. And it was a pretty fun coffee shop to work at. But after the coronavirus came along, and then the government handouts came along, and then the, jobless benefit promise, if you're out of a job because of coronavirus, sign here and you can get money from the government. She actually had employees coming to her saying, please lay me off. Please lay me off because I can get more money from the government than you're paying me. And that, my friends, is a little microcosm of the massive problem we are creating in Washington by perpetuating this shutdown, by paying people not to work, by paying people to simply stay home and say, well, they were, they lost their job because of this virus. She had people asking her to please lay them off. The spending in Washington, every dollar, I do think that as the government's closed, we have to help people get through, but we have to make these bills far more laser focused. If we have to do another bill to help, for example, this most recent spending did was helping employers hold on to employees, be able to pay them through this crisis. That kind of payment, small business, keep people in the payroll so we can keep that aspect of our business going. I'm kind of okay with that because I think you have to keep the businesses going, but we ultimately cannot let this become what is already becoming the norm and the mindset of leftists in this country. It is like the next trick they found to develop more dependency, more weakness, more dependency on government among the American people. Make no mistake, the left in this country is driven to perpetuate the shutdown of this country for as long as they can. I'm not meaning by what I'm saying that the coronavirus is a hoax. It's not. It's serious. It's horrible. COVID-19 is horrible. The suffering is terrible. We need to be doing everything we can be doing to help the suffering, to get supplies to the hospitals and doctors, to manufacture what is needed. All of that is needed. But we have to be laser focused on the idea in this country that getting us back to work and getting the economy moving is the only way to save America. When I say the left is using this crisis to destroy this country, I am not in the slightest exaggerating. The Democrat media mob in this country, the leftists who orchestrate policy in this country, the media who work night and day to be the Pravda media, putting the message out of the Democrat left in this country, they see this economic meltdown as an opportunity to destroy the victories of the Trump presidency, to destroy, because President Trump did not just happen to come along and, surprise, surprise, create a fabulous economy. The economy that we were all enjoying in this country, it came into play, into being under President Trump. But more importantly, it came into being because President Trump embraced free market ideas, embraced capitalism, freedom, entrepreneurship, renewal of the American spirit, renewal of the can-do attitude in this country. The left was watching President Trump sailing toward re-election in November 2020, sailing toward it on a downhill slope. He had the economy going, he had the military being strengthened, he had our borders getting secured, he had the American economy booming, he had every single hyphenated group in America doing better, having lowest unemployment numbers of all time. He had a fabulous thing going. And the impeachment didn't destroy President Trump as the left had hoped. And the entire Russia-Trump collusion hoax did not destroy President Trump as the left had hoped. All the other slings and arrows they sent toward him, all the attacks on him about whether the Emoluments Clause or his tax records, all of the ways they tried to attack him, nothing stuck. So here they are. We're in April 2020. We have elections in November. Elections around the corner. And what the Democrat media mob in this country is desperately hoping for is to delay the suffering in our economy because of the coronavirus long enough to blame Trump in the fall, to say this is all President Trump's fault because the economy is in tatters. He handled the coronavirus poorly. He shut down the economy. Everything's his fault. You have to believe me when I tell you, the left is bringing zero good faith to this conversation in America. Zero good faith in their messaging to the American people about what they think should be done to handle this virus. They're not trying to solve the virus problem. They're not trying to solve the economy problem. They're not trying to bring the economy back because to them, this is their last hurrah, their last ticket to shutting down a second term for President Trump. Other quick points I want to hit when I'm in this very last segment on spending and the shutdown protests. You're seeing more and more protests in this country about the shutdown all over the country. You see them in blue states. You see them in Minnesota. I have a conservative friend in Minnesota who just sent me a long list of all the things they're doing. You're seeing shutdown protests around this country and people starting to wake up. Even people who 8 weeks ago or more, 10 weeks ago, whenever they started to really, really get worried about the coronavirus, people on our side of the aisle saying, whoa, this is serious, this is bad, everybody's got to shut down. My friends I rely on in Washington, who are pretty connected at high levels, were the ones saying, no, this virus is serious, it's bad, everyone's got to stay home, we're going to take a terrible hit. We had people on our side of the aisle, not only in Washington, but all over the country thinking, okay, this virus is going to just destroy us all unless we jump on board and do everything Fauci is saying and everything Birx is saying. And now, as time has rolled on, and here we are in the middle of past the middle of April, and more Americans are waking up. More and more Americans are saying, wait a minute, the models were wrong by orders of magnitude. The models were grotesquely wrong. It's not 1.5 to 2.2 million Americans who may sadly pass on from this virus. It's more like 60,000, like a bad flu year. That's more like the number. More Americans are recognizing the left is using this crisis to crush civil liberty. They are watching what the left does in cities and counties all over this country to crush civil liberty, to force people to stay at home. And they are using this meltdown in order to embolden themselves, to use it as something to clobber President Trump over the head, but far more to tell the voters of America, to tell individual Americans, you know what, Trump did this to you, but vote for Democrats, vote for big government, we'll fix it. We'll get you a paycheck, we'll get you another $2,000 a month, we'll get you everything you need. In fact, there was a headline, Alan West mentioned in my show yesterday. I want to tell you what the headline was, just one headline, but it speaks volumes about how the left sees this. In Politico, a left-wing source, economic meltdown gives Democrats new hope in Texas. Think about that. They recognize bad economy, crushed by the shutdown, is making them hopeful of getting votes. They understand that this, this whole destruction of our economy and the weakening of the economy and the scary place we are as people in this country, that it is going to give them political potential. Why would anyone want to vote for a party that is telling you we are rubbing our greedy hands together, enjoying your misery? That is what the Democrats are saying. That's what the left-wing mindset is. We're enjoying this misery because this is going to give us victory in the fall in November 2020. People, you have to see this. When the left and the media mob complains about the protest, because I was starting to say earlier, these people I know in Washington and all over our country, conservatives who were very alarmed at first, are starting to say, hey, wait a minute. The numbers aren't there. The models were wrong. People are recovering. 98% of people who contract coronavirus recover. We had coronavirus in this country earlier than we thought. We had people who recovered from it by last year. We have been in this country reacting to the coronavirus in a way as though it was the newest and most explosive and dangerous and unknown thing, unaware that actually that we had been pushed, we had been molded into fear and fright to putting policies in place that are hurting this country, and we can turn it around. So when people start protesting, because they're protesting all over the country saying, you know what, we should have all along gone with protecting the vulnerable and leaving the healthy people willing to work, let them work. Let America work. Let America live. That message is resonating around this country. So the left, not wanting to see too soon a recovery from this mess we are in, is shutting down those protests. And I got to mention Facebook. Facebook, I got to tell you folks, I do the show on Facebook. I enjoy going on Facebook. But Facebook actually announced, Mark Zuckerberg said in an interview that Facebook, were going to they were going to ban organizers and block postings of any lockdown protests, calling any protests against lockdowns as, their word, misinformation. And I'm sorry, folks, if you want to say that you think maybe Mark Zuckerberg is just trying to protect the suffering and he doesn't have any political skin in this game, this is not political decision, this is just compassion on his part for people who have coronavirus, you know what? I don't think that's true. I think he sees entirely what the left is doing. He wants the left to succeed in having the virus destroy our economy. But even if you think he's innocently saying that, in what other context do we shut down protests? Does Facebook shut down protests, meaning can't post your information, can't share the posting, yet you're going to get banned from Facebook? And what other issue do they do that? They only do it when the conservative message is being put out there, and they don't like very much having that conservative message put out there. One last thing before I turn to why it matters to you today. So there was a great little mention. I just want to give it a tease for today. I'll probably come back to it again, another show. But Attorney General Barr has announced that he is going to go after governors who persist with strict lockdown rules. We're going to turn tomorrow's show and talk about a little bit about the reopening of America, what governors are doing, how they're trying to move forward on this. So there is a real effort on the conservative side to reopen things, a real effort, and on the part of a small number of governors. There's a lot of talk and political chit chat. Oh yeah, we're going to reopen, but doing nothing. But there is a movement toward that. And there are many, many, many elected officials in this country, from mayors, county government, state government, who've never had this much power in their lives. And they are using it to the fullest. And they are imposing and continuing draconian lockdown and other measures because they can, despite the protests, despite their awareness that healthy people actually want to go back to work. They are thinking they've got this, they're on top of the situation, they can stop these people, and they're going to. So I love Attorney General Barr signaling to the governors, at some point, your lockdown orders are actually unconstitutional. That's what he's saying. And if they are, we're going to come after you.